so true. I'm telling you, Vince-Dow nationalism, literally the future of the Republican Party. You cannot stop it. Yo, look, I'm the baby now.
This monument will never be desecrated. These heroes will never be defaced. From this day forward, a new vision will govern our land. From this day forward, it's going to be only America first. America first.
John, thoughts on Vince-Dow nationalism?
Oh, I mean, I've been campaigning that for the better part of 3 years now. Before I even knew Vince, it actually appeared to me in a dream, and I just have sort of been trying to like subtly, when they say John Doyle dog whistles, he does, but not in the way they think. It's always about Vince-Dow nationalism. They say I'm like a white nationalist. No, I'm a Vince-Dow man.
Americanism, not globalism, will be our credo as long as we are led by politicians who will not put America first. Then we can be assured that other nations will not treat America with respect, the respect that we deserve. The American people will come first once again.
Millions of Americans sincerely love Donald Trump. They love Donald Trump because no one else loved them. The country they built, the country their ancestors fought for over hundreds of years, has left them to die in their unfashionable little town, mocked and despised by the sneering half-wits with finance degrees but no actual skills who seem to run everything all of a sudden.
Okay, and we are live, ladies and gentlemen. What is going on here? Happy Columbus Day, everyone. Welcome back. In chat, can you please let me know if you can hear me? Okay, no 714 jokes aside, we've been having some genuine, actual non-conspiracy theory, non-made-up problems with the mic today. So please confirm that you can hear me here and the mic is not spazzing out. Okay, hopefully that's not the case. But what is going on, everybody? Welcome to tonight's stream. Happy Monday, everyone, and happy Columbus Day. So as you read in the title, tonight we'll be discussing the Southwest Airlines vaccine mandate and the consequent, what appears to be a strike that has actually come out of that. So we'll be talking about that, and we'll also be talking about Columbus Day itself. I feel like it's appropriate. I feel like it's just a good time to kind of bring it up, and it is really something that the left has demonized a lot over the past, I would say, probably about a decade, right? I mean, I'm sure it's been brewing in academia long before that, but this is really the anti-Columbus movement is something that's really gone mainstream, probably post 2010, at least to my knowledge. I mean, I am kind of young. That might be skewing it a little bit. Not in focus, you said? It is in focus. That's a psyop. That's a psyop. It literally is in focus. You're lying. But anyways, and we'll also be talking about Texas. Okay, the state of Texas actually has a rare W over Florida. We'll be talking about that in a second. But I'll actually begin tonight. Okay, I feel like it's a good place to start to acknowledge the fact that, today is Columbus Day, and it is Columbus Day. It is not Indigenous Peoples Day, right? It is Columbus Day. But I think what is very interesting to bring up is the fact that the problem I think conservatives have, and the reason why this, unfortunately, I mean, if I'm going to be realistic, not to blackpill you, but unfortunately, I think in the grand scheme of things, like in the long term, the whole Indigenous Peoples Day movement is probably going to take a lot of mainstream traction. And actually, you're probably going to see most places in 2050, right? You bring up the whole conservatives in 2050 meme. In 2050, you probably will be seeing conservatives on Columbus Day saying, well, we're the real celebrators of Indigenous Peoples Day, this and that. And that is actually because I think the kind of defense of Columbus Day often fails to acknowledge the fact. We try to say, well, he wasn't perfect. Okay, nobody's perfect, but he wasn't perfect. But, we should just still acknowledge him because he discovered America, this and that. Meanwhile, you have the left over here who's literally, calling this guy a genocidal maniac. What do you hear about Columbus? What do you hear about Columbus if you're in university, if you're in school? The beard is back. The beard is back. It literally, it partially is. It's not fully back. Okay. But it is partially back a little bit. Christopher Graves says, I think YouTube has blocked me from super chatting. It hasn't worked in over a week. The utter state of YouTube doesn't want you to be helping the conservative content creators. That is so sad. That is so sad. But anyways, I think what's important to point out here, and what is something that is not talked about very often, right? Like I said, I feel like oftentimes we try to get around it. We try to say, well, the people's history of the United States kind of narrative on Columbus, it's true, but we should be still celebrating him for his contribution to history, right? Notice what that kind of presupposes. What does the left say about Christopher Columbus? Like, they literally say that this guy was a slaver. This guy was a genocidal maniac. I actually read A People's History of the United States, at least part of it. I couldn't finish it, but when I was a lot younger, I actually read People's History of the United States. And this is a book that basically alleges that Columbus was like cutting the ears off of natives and all this crazy stuff. Like, painting Christopher Columbus literally as one of like the most genocidal evil people in history. And the conservative response to it, this is why I say the way we're approaching this is going to fail. The conservative response to it is, yeah, but nobody's perfect, right? Like, that's not a convincing response. That's not a response that I think a lot of people will buy in the grand scheme of things. Don't get me wrong. The boomers who grew up with Columbus Day, even those who kind of lean more liberal, lean more Democrat, lean more kind of Democrat, still who grew up on the East Coast, they're like, okay, we're still fine with Columbus Day. The Italians, okay, and I feel like I have the authority to speak on this. As you guys know, 25% Italian. I am a quarter Italian. Okay, few know that because I look totally Asian, but I am full Italian. As an Italian, I will say I don't think the Italians are giving up Columbus Day anytime soon. Actually, as a matter of fact, you may remember last year during the George Floyd riots, they were trying to tear down the Columbus statue, and a bunch of these Guido Italians were just like, hey, what you doing, huh? Like, they all pulled up protecting her, right? But aside from kind of those populations of people, when you look at the way they're teaching Columbus to younger generations, the way actually growing up, right? I think when I was in kindergarten, elementary school, that was kind of the last wave of pro-Columbus teaching. Like I said, I think this is something that like in the 2010s really started to become a mainstream thing in academia, right? So I was in elementary school and stuff. I was actually kind of taught Columbus in a positive light. I don't think that's the case anymore. I'm fairly certain at this point, with some exceptions, they're just going the full-on genocidal maniac route in even elementary school. But by the time I got to high school, the narrative certainly started to shift, and that was kind of when I was being taught the genocide stuff, the slavery stuff, all this. And so when you look at the fact that younger generations are just being basically raised up to think this, again, your parents, right? The Zoomers in the audience, most of our audience is young. Your parents were taught to revere Columbus. Your parents were taught Columbus in a positive light. I can almost guarantee, even if you are in a red state, and maybe you're in like a super rural area where it's still being taught, but I would say even you, probably who's in a red state, but maybe lives in a city, I mean, you were probably taught Columbus in a very negative genocidal light as well, right? The issue is, the narrative around Christopher Columbus about him being a genocidal maniac, this and that, actually, as a matter of fact, largely is not true. Okay, it's largely not true. It's largely based on complete misinformation. That's the issue here. That's the big thing. That's the thing we're kind of missing here, right? We always try to say, well, but well, we should still celebrate it. But sure, there's some truth to the people's history of the United States. There literally is not, though. There literally is not, though. And listen, I'm not going to proclaim to be, the total expert on the Columbus stuff. I've not really researched this to a great extent, but I can tell you, okay, the fact that much of what you are told about Columbus's treatment of the natives was written by one of his main political opponents. Okay, so this was a guy, I believe his name was Francisco Barbadillo, right? That's how you say his last name. And how this whole sort of anti-Columbus movement really started was in the mid-2000s when they dug up like one of these letters, memos that this guy wrote, right? And this was totally alleging like full-scale genocide and all the basically claims you hear about Columbus. The vast majority of them come from this guy. Now, the issue is, and you can look into this, the issue is that Francisco was one of Columbus's, and not one of, he literally was Columbus's chief political rival. He was literally the guy who was trying to usurp power, right? Trying to replace Columbus as the governor, right? The Spanish governor of the West Indies. So what the main kind of evidence, quote unquote, around Columbus essentially comes from what could be seen in the modern day as like nothing more than a political attack ad, right? This is literally something that came from his chief political rival. And this is essentially the only source that the left ever tends to use when it comes to this whole Columbus was a radical genociding maniac thing, right? Now, the issue is that when you look at and listen, I'm not saying that it's not true because it was simply written by someone who did it in bad faith, because it could certainly be the case that even if it was used, right, as a political attack, it could still be the case that it's true, right? Even if it's being used for nefarious purposes, even if it's being used for a kind of a power grab, that's not to say it's not true. The issue is, if you actually look through the vast majority of other primary source documents from that time, the record is actually extremely clear that the treatment of the natives by Christopher Columbus was actually extremely good, okay? Christopher Columbus actually clashed with many of the other Spanish colonists, and right when he was kind of governor of the West Indies, running the West Indies, he got into many conflicts because he specifically was the kind of one voice amidst the whole thing that was actually pro kind of treating the natives with humanity. And that's kind of the aspect of this that people seem to throw out and forget. I mean, are we not to acknowledge the fact that, number one, right, Christopher Columbus in one such letter where he discusses the selling of native slaves, this and that, okay, and this was used in a Vox article, I think it was about like 2 years ago or something like that. In that same article, right, where he's talking about the selling of slaves and was used against them, which did happen, like nobody's denying that did not happen. But in that same exact article, literally, Columbus is talking about how he's not a fan of the slave trade and now he doesn't like that it's happening, right? So that's what people need to understand, right? Obviously, there were other kind of factors going on, right? He didn't have total control of the colony or what was going on here. But Christopher Columbus actually, from historical records, was like by far the most humane guy when it came to, the treatment of the natives. Okay. And again, this is not something that you're going to be told. It's going to, they're always going to toe the genocide line. And I'm not even necessarily saying that like we need to, that it's not just enough to simply say we're going to celebrate kind of Western heritage and Western history, but I really think this is a case where you could actually be pushing back against left-wing misinformation, and it's just simply not the case, right? The first resident Catholic bishop that ever kind of came to the Americas, right? This was a guy named Bartolome de Lascas, I believe, right? So here's a guy who was literally like the biggest advocate at the time for like Native American rights, if you that's what you want to kind of call it, right? This was a guy who was, very big on humane treatment of the natives by the Spanish colonists. Okay. And so again, and this was sort of the voice for that at the time. And he clashed with, kind of the many of the other Spanish colonists because of it. He's someone who is kind of respected in that sense. And he, again, So here's another like prime here, and he, alongside many of the other primary source documents, was a big fan of Columbus, and he was a big fan of actually the way Columbus wanted to treat the natives. And actually, it was only, you want to talk about encomienda and the kind of the slave system that was set up in the West Indies and set up in the Spanish colonies. This is something that Columbus actually opposed and was basically forced to capitulate on when he returned to the West Indies, I believe, like about his third time or something like that, specifically because of the fact that like he was basically facing, this total like full scale uprising against, by his own colony. And ultimately, he basically got, in the end, the power over his own colony was usurped from him. Okay. But understand, and this was like basically the main reason why, people actually did not like him at the time as Spanish governor, right? So the whole kind of genocide line, the whole kind of like, slavery line, like all that stuff actually is not true. And I know I'm not articulating it necessarily the best, because it's not really a topic that I'm the biggest expert on. But honestly, like if you want, okay, you can actually go watch. I remember like about 2 years ago, what actually kind of pilled me on the Columbus thing was, I believe it was like one of those old Michael Knowles lectures that you basically watch when you're first getting into like conservative politics. That was actually what I watched on it. And I believe it was his speech at Notre Dame. I haven't watched that thing in about like 2 years now. But if you really want kind of like more to like learn about Columbus and the kind of truth about Columbus, I actually recommend you. That's actually something I would suggest actually going to watch, because it is a pretty thought out, historically backed up, reasoned defense of Columbus, right? But with that being said, and with it essentially being known that most of the genocide line, the slavery line, really has nothing to do with Columbus, okay, let us ask the question of, why exactly do they hate Christopher Columbus so much? I think we know the answer, right? They hate the Western civilization, all that stuff. But let us also kind of recognize the fact that look actually at Christopher Columbus's role in history in a way that, is not really typically, I guess, thought about or considered. Because obviously we know it to be the case. Oh, he sailed the ocean blue, this and that. He discovered America, blah, blah, blah. All true. But what's important, I think, to recognize is the fact that in many ways, what Christopher Columbus did actually was essentially save Western civilization, and save specifically at the time. Okay, now in the modern day, we tend to think of Western civilization as like liberal democracy, John Locke, the Enlightenment, all this stuff. No, I'm talking about pure Christian Western civilization, pre-Enlightenment, basically, even like pre-Protestant Reformation, right? All that type of stuff. This is original Western civilization. This is original Christian Western civilization. This is kind of the OG West, okay? The original West. Christopher Columbus essentially revived that from the dead, because what you were dealing with for centuries, right? For centuries was Muslim conquest of Christian lands like all over the place. And, the Ottoman Empire was basically at its height. And this was a big problem. As a matter of fact, the reason, this is something you did probably learn in school, the reason why they were even considering, going west to try to find a route to the west was specifically because of the fact the European nations were trying to find a way around the Ottoman Empire, because the Ottoman Empire was running the show. Muslim Islamic Eastern civilization, or Middle Eastern civilization, I should say, was running the show in the world. The West largely was a civilization in stagnation, if not a civilization in decline, right? And what happens? Christopher Columbus basically brought back Christianity, the power of the Christian nations in the world, and brought back the power of the West in the world, okay? Because when Christopher Columbus discovers America, that is basically the equalizer. That is basically the balancing scale with the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire, the largest land empire in the world at the time, right? And this is, again, something that had most of the control. Europe was kind of struggling. Europe was not doing too hot. Of course, they find the American colonies. Then, basically that's when Europe became the wealthy ones. That's when they kind of became the classical, not the classical. What era is that called? I think it's believed just called the Columbian era, right? The Columbian era of history, that is something that is basically largely controlled, right, by European civilization, all because of Columbus. all because of Columbus. And this is not something that people think about, right? People don't really consider the fact that Columbus basically saved the West, revived the West, and revived, oh, wait a minute, Christianity. Anyone remembering this? Christianity in the world. So, it really should not be a surprise that this is specifically why Christopher Columbus is demonized in probably the most ridiculous ways you've seen out of any character in history. Because obviously it is true, right? That, they slander a lot of people in history. They've lied about a lot of people in history. Nobody's kind of denying that fact, right? But the way they do it with Columbus is like particularly out there and insane and based on lies and based on misinformation, in ways that are just like totally out there because, obviously when it comes to someone like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, right, they will kind of exaggerate the evils of the founding fathers. They will exaggerate the wrongdoings of the founding fathers, but you'll notice they won't go like so radically far where it's just basically the polar opposite of the truth necessarily. They'll basically try to like stretch it a little bit, push it, stretch the bounds. Christopher Columbus, it's like basically the narrative around him is a complete inversion. It is a complete 180 of the truth. I think it's important to understand why. And the reason why, not just because he's like a revered figure in Western civilization, I think it's because of the fact precisely that he actually kind of revived the Christian nations in the world. You have something like the Renaissance, which was a cultural revival, right? And things were recovering a little bit from medieval Europe, which struggled a lot, but the sheer economic and military power that grew out of the conquest and the settlement of the Americas is really what made the last 5 to 6 centuries, right, of world history belonging to European Christian civilizations. And so, it really should be no surprise that that's what they fear. That is what the regime fears. It's so true. So anyways, with that being said, we can talk more about Columbus, I guess, a little bit later. But tonight, right now, we're about to go to the kind of the main story of the night, which is this Southwest airline employees whole debacle going on. But I'll check chat for a few minutes really quick. Vince said based. So true. I say this so often. The Ottoman Empire owned white slaves, by the way, something you will never hear in school. So true. And beyond the Ottoman Empire, too, you have the Barbary states in North Africa. Same story. Actually, I believe they were part of the Ottoman Empire, right, for a little bit, but I don't know the whole story there. I'm sorry. Hunter Phillips says, "Have you heard about the utter Chad that is Mark Robinson?" Mark Robinson, from what I've seen from him, he's decent, right? Anyone who saves the West will be demonized. Christopher Columbus to eventually Jesus Christ. Watch they will. Oh, you know what? Maybe that is someone who is actually more misrepresented in modern history than Columbus, right? Probably, maybe arguably Jesus. Now, I think they do a different thing with Jesus because they know better to an extent when working with us than to try to vilify Jesus and necessarily try to say Jesus was evil. So instead, what you see, right, or I should say Jesus is evil, right? So instead, right, what you see from them is not necessarily well, sometimes they will just say religion is stupid, that whole line, right? But actually, primarily speaking, what you often see from them is things like progressive Christianity, right? They basically try to change the narrative, change the history of Jesus to basically turn him into some like left-wing, love everyone, and not love everyone in the biblical sense, but really love everyone in like the contemporary, yeah, bro, kind of sense. You know what I mean? They try to turn him into like this postmodern left-wing hippie that he literally was basically the opposite of, right? Jesus was someone who, in many ways, was basically the kind of annoying preacher, right, that modern progressive Christians claim to hate, and claim that like the conservative evangelicals and stuff in America, like these are the problem. These people are, that's actually who Jesus was. Jesus was not really someone who is just like, hey, yeah, we love every, you know what I mean? He told people to turn from their sin, right? He told people to repent. He made a big deal out of this. So, we can talk about that some other time, but hold on. Let me plug in my computer. It freaking got unplugged for some reason here. Not cool. We hate to see it. Is it still unplugged? Oop, that's stupid. Hold on. Give me a second. Oh, that's why I put him. Hold on. All right, give me a second here, guys. I gotta play around with my ports real quick. All right, we can be back now. Hold on. That was my bad. That was my bad. We had to switch these out. Okay, we should be good to go now. Oh, hold on. Wait a minute. All right, there we go. Now we're back. Okay, what's up, guys? All right. So, anyways, that's also something else important to point out about Columbus. You know, very religious guy, very big on actually spreading the gospel to the natives. You wonder why they hate them so much. You wonder why they hate him so much. Okay, it is the case. It is the case. Sam Matson says 10-11. You're not funny. You are so painfully unfunny, Sam. I'm just kidding. Okay, I'm just kidding. You people, I told you I would be right back. I'm like, give me a second. I gotta switch around my cables, and you're just yelling like, oh, 10, 11, 10, 11. Not funny. So unfunny. So not true, by the way. So just false. The slander. What am I, Christopher Columbus now? Is that what I am, huh? You all doing me like I'm Christopher Columbus? Is that what we're doing here? The travesty, the atrocities that are being committed against my name. So not cool. So not cool. All right. Anyways, guys. So going on to kind of the main story, the main thing I wanted to talk about tonight. And I'm sure you guys have already seen this story by now. I'm sure you guys have already read about this. Is this whole debacle with Southwest Airlines, right? So essentially, what happened over the weekend, which is very ironic because I have a flight this Friday. It's on an American. Hopefully I don't get screwed there. Okay. Well, you know what? If I do get screwed for a righteous cause, I'm honestly fine with it. Okay. I'll take it. But basically Southwest Airlines, right, canceled, like, I think it was something like hundreds of flights over the weekend. And you know, they claimed it was apparently due to an issue with air traffic control and weather, which was ironic and which was like clearly so not the case, so not true, because of the fact that you look at other airlines, no other airlines have this problem, specifically because of Southwest. Well, what was the deal with Southwest? What was going on was the implementation of a mandate, right? A company-wide mandate for the jab. And so, you know, coinciding with the time, we basically know what happened here. Is, in fact, you know, we can speculate technically, but we can basically say with like total, utter, and complete certainty. Jacob says airplane, used car. I don't have time to drive to this place. This place is far away. Okay. This place is far away. I don't have the time to drive. Okay. I use car when I can. I literally have to fly. Okay. I literally have to take the flight here. Okay. But I dropped my pen. We essentially know the story here. Labor shortage because of the vaccine mandate. They all walked off the job. Okay. Or they got fired or whatever it is. But in short, because of that, labor shortage commences, labor shortage takes place. Now, what I will say about this is basically the fulfillment of what I basically said has to be the solution to these mandates, both those that are imposed by the government on federal contractors, as well as the OSHA thing, as well as just these straight up private mandates, right, by Southwest. You know, I think Walmart is implementing one as well. You know, all these corporations in America that you see with their own mandates. Look, you know, protesting, that's great. As a matter of fact, I'll be speaking at one of those protests on Saturday, October 23rd in Tallahassee, Florida. I'll be giving you guys more details on that soon. But ultimately, the point of protesting, and shout out to the protests that have happened so far, we endorse that. But the point of protesting essentially is more so an optics thing when it comes to the general public. You have to basically be showing the people kind of out in force that, hey, there are people who are against this. There are people who are anti these particular mandates. And what this kind of show of protesting does is it does help in the sense that especially the people who are not really that involved, people who are not that serious about politics, which is frankly the vast majority of the population, what that does is essentially kind of breed it in their brains, kind of even in a way kind of shift the Overton window mentally for them to kind of notice, hey, this is what's going on, this is what most people are on board with. And because most people are essentially sheep, most people are essentially followers, that kind of has the power to move the needle with a lot of people mentally on the issue. So that's great. But the issue is, we kind of see from the people in power, we see from the government, we see from the private companies, all this stuff, that they basically don't care, right? They really don't care, that we're going to go march in the streets and peacefully protest at the state capitol or whatever. Those people actually don't care. They literally don't care about us. They don't care what we have to say in that sense. You know what I mean? Ironic, of course, because they always talk about democracy. But, what would we expect? We understand that. We all get that. The thing is that I think this is an issue particularly that we are actually not powerless on. We're not powerless because of the fact, yes, even though the federal government is controlled by the opposition party, even though most Republican governors, and we'll be getting to that a little bit later in the night, but most Republican governors refuse to do anything about private mandates, even in some cases like mandates within the school systems, right? Most of the governors literally that are supposed to be on our side are doing absolutely nothing about it. So we don't even have the party on our side. And of course, we know on a societal level, we are so basically fundamentally lost when it comes to the institutions that all the corporations, most of the companies, a lot of the businesses are run by people who fundamentally hate us, fundamentally are puppets for the same exact poison that's coming out of our university and our puppets for the cultural Marxists, et cetera, et cetera. Like left-wing control of institutions basically runs so deep that even without government mandates, you're still going to see a lot of businesses, especially big businesses, i.e. Southwest Airlines, do this anyway. Okay. But the one thing I will say, and the one place we do have power, is the fact that unlike a lot of other issues, right? Issues that we can't affect so much directly, this is an issue of economics. And this is an issue particularly of economic participation, okay? And that's to say, there are millions and millions of people in this country who are unvaccinated. Most of those people honestly, by this point, most of the people who are unvaccinated are people who are just not going to get vaccinated, right? They're going to refuse. And so what I'm trying to say is that there are millions and millions of people in this country who will either walk off the job or willingly get fired instead of just complying with the mandates. And that's just truth. That's just a reality. And, that is something, like I've said in the past, this is something that, people should take a stand on, quite frankly, right? Now, consider basically now, obviously, this is a collective action effort. So if a bunch of the unvaccinated people basically just comply, basically just cave in, which I don't think is really something that is happening. Now, it is something, unfortunately, that is happening in a lot of some certain corporations. But as you can see in the case of Southwest Airlines, this is something that is actually going to be hurting a lot of companies. And frankly, is going to be hurting the broad scale economy. Here's the deal. And here's the reason why it's actually a little bit different. And we actually have the power of this is because of the fact that by sheer numbers alone, the economy requires our participation, right? In order to basically keep the economy going, you need workers to fill the places and make things. And then if you want to talk about passports on a consumer level, right? Because there are a lot of also mandates that are being put in place for consumers. Back at home where I live in LA County, they basically put in a passport requirement for basically anything, like anything you want to do that's not takeout food or a grocery store, everything else, gyms, indoor dining, sports games, all that stuff, you got to show the passport, all that, what have you, right? On the other side, right, you will also see businesses be hurt by the fact that you're going to see consumers, a lack of consumer participation on the flip side as well. Now, the thing is that this essentially we have to basically call their bluff on this, right? Because what essentially has to happen, and the actual way we can move the needle on this, and the actual way we can kind of stop this in its tracks, is peacefully speaking. Okay, let me be clear. This is I'm calling for a peaceful resolution to this, but it is the truth that we, as these people, have to basically willingly disrupt the economy. We have to actually cause essentially damage to the economy. Not even in the sense that we're going to be trying to intentionally sabotage it or whatever, but because of the sheer reality that we will be unable to participate. We'll be unable to work most of the jobs out there because of the fact that, because of our medical status. And in many places, we'll also be unable to patronize the restaurants, a lot of the other businesses, stuff like that, right? And so what's going to happen as a result of our lack of economic growth? The economy is going to be hugely struggling. And most of all, the people who are going to be struggling the most are actually the people at the top. Right? Not to go left wing on you, not to go socialist on you, but it is the reality that our kind of withdrawal from the labor market, especially, is going to be something that primarily is going to be hurting actually the CEOs and the people at the top, the shareholders, right? The kind of business interest side of these corporations, more so than it will the workers who stay on the job. Because the workers who stay on the job, if anything, they'll be getting paid more. But who are their lack of revenue really is going to be hurting the most, again, is the people at the top. Well, that is the one place where we actually do have power. Money talks. Boycotts, when done seriously and when done effectively, actually do work. The issue is, the reason why they don't work most of the time is because, they're kind of half-assed, right? There's not really serious effort to get them done. They're not really effective. It kind of lasts for like 2 weeks or so. People go back to using it, right? So that's why most of the time when we say boycott the NFL, boycott this, boycott that, it doesn't work. But in this case, we don't even have a choice. I wouldn't even say so much it is a boycott so much as we're basically just being segregated, right? We're basically just being pushed away. And so this is something, again, that is actually going to, that basically we're going to have to be forced to deal with. Like, we're actually going to have to be forced to basically pull ourselves out of the economy. But as a result of that, it's also going to be an inevitability that a lot of people, especially the people at the top, are going to be really hurt by this, okay? The people who run the corporations are going to be dealing with like actual severe losses. This is not like, oh, we go woke and lose a few dollars. No, this is something that's actually going to be screwing up their business, like genuinely screwing up their business, which frankly, I don't even feel bad about. I mean, if I were to be honest, do I really feel bad about the fact that a bunch of evil people who run a bunch of evil post-national, transnational, anti-American, socially left-wing corporations? Oh no, we're screwing up the power of Amazon and all these other companies and this and that. Yeah, do I really feel so bad about that? I mean, frankly, I don't. Because I know I've had people come along and say, well, you're basically saying to crash the economy because you don't want to comply with the mandates. Yes, that actually is what I'm saying. And I'm not even saying to actively go and try to do it. I'm just saying this is just basically an action-reaction consequence of what's going to happen so long as we hold the line. And then here's how we basically get them to back down on it. So you're going to see that. Now, as a result of that, if it is effective, and if it is something that where it's like they genuinely can't find workers, they're genuinely in a labor shortage, they're genuinely operating at a cost. On the other side, they're genuinely losing consumers and are losing business to substantial degrees. Like, really, at some point, unless they're willingly going to let the corporation entirely crash and burn, which, I mean, if they do that, it's just like, okay, right? A lot of corporations will be forced to back down on this. They'll be forced to kind of just back off on this issue, right? Because like they literally will just need our participation to basically keep things running. Many of them have already been hemorrhaging money. A lot of businesses are already kind of dealing with huge losses from lockdowns, all the other stuff. They really can't afford, in the way that you might think they do, they really can't afford to lose your participation. And that's why I essentially say this whole situation is basically two sides try to call each other's bluff. Okay, so you have the corporations and you have the governments basically saying, well, I know you're saying you refuse to get it, but if we put your job on the line, will you still refuse? I don't think you will. I think you'll just shut up and take it because you're basically just coping anyway, right? So they're trying to basically call the bluff on that. And then we on the other side need to be the ones basically saying here, well, Actually, as a matter of fact, you can talk all tough you want, corporation, but you actually kind of need our participation. You basically need us being involved with this whole situation in order to basically function properly, right? So you see this kind of tension going on, right? This kind of like Cuban Missile Crisis, this sort of mutually assured destruction style thing going on. Eventually, we do this effectively. We do this in kind of big enough numbers. What you will see is, frankly, a lot of corporations give it up. Either give it up or destroy themselves. Right? If we again, this cannot just be something of one or two people walking off the job. If everyone bands together, like it's going to be one of two things that's going to be happening there. Okay, and on top of that, if you want to talk about the federal contractor thing, a lot of the the OSHA stuff, right? At the same time, we also know, and libertarians can try to disagree all they want, but we also know that it's just the truth, and it's certainly true that these mandates that the federal government imposed, as well as, frankly, a lot of state mandates, quite frankly, but just knowing the nature of our politics, knowing how money works in our politics, kind of knowing the level of lobbying, corruption, all that stuff in our politics, we obviously know that the major corporations in America were kind of informed of this, previously, right? And frankly, I think it has to be the case that most of the major corporations, Walmart, Amazon, all those companies that have like real pull in the federal government and in politics and all that, clearly, I think it's pretty obvious they agreed with this. They wanted this, right? And that's why I was precisely, when it came to the OSHA thing, I was actually against this sort of talking point that it's only an issue of private business versus government power, because we clearly know that the private businesses were totally fine with this too. That's why they allowed it to happen, right? That's why they didn't try to lobby against it happening. And it was even better for them. It was even better for them because then, all these companies basically were able to say, well, it's not our fault, even though they were fine with it. Well, it's not our fault we're forcing you to, get it, right? Because the federal government told us we have to do it. And so, look, sorry, I mean, that's how it is, right? And so they can actually shift the blame to the federal government while also getting exactly what they want. And we know that's what they want. Okay, we know that's what they want. And we know that's what the vast majority of them were totally cool with. And that we know that's the same social agenda of their CEOs, of the shareholders, of the people who run these companies, right? But precisely on the other hand, when we understand corporate power in politics, when we understand kind of the reality of that, what's going to happen when the corporations realize that those who were refusing to get this thing were not bluffing? They were not bluffing. They were not just ready to basically immediately back down on the issue, which I think many of them were basically betting on the fact that this was going to occur. We're going to institute this mandate, and because people don't want to lose their job, they're just going to be like, okay, fine, time to get it. And quite frankly, in some companies that probably worked, some of them. But in others like Southwest Airlines that you're seeing now, obviously that's not what happened, right? That's kind of not the way things went down. Well, when the corporations are really starting to hurt, really starting to hemorrhage money, what do you think at that point they're going to be trying to tell the federal government? It's either going to be A, can we have a bailout? Or B, can we please just get rid of this thing because it's really hurting our business here, and it's really kind of making it impossible for us to operate, right? These CEOs are losing all this money. See, that's kind of the point where we need to push it. At the same time, if you want to talk about the OSHA thing, look at the state of the Biden administration right now. Okay, kind of look at where he is in the approval ratings, totally underwater. The economy is struggling. Inflation is struggling. Do not also be surprised if they realize, in order to kind of just have to save face, in order to kind of go into 2022 with somewhat of a non-totally screwed up economy, with mass unemployment and mass inflation, all this stuff. Consider the fact, again, even the Biden admin, who we all know really just doesn't care, right? They're very kind of dogmatic on this whole thing. But I would go so far as to say, if this is effective and this kind of works out enough, you could even see kind of a reversing of the course, or kind of an easing back of things from the federal government itself. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I'm saying it's a possibility to consider, because they also have things on the line, right? They have things on the line here, right? And you can talk about, I don't know, Great Reset, all that stuff. But I would also say, to an extent, it's that kind of happened with the lockdowns, all that stuff. I mean, really, they can frankly only go so long before at some point, if they want to avoid kind of a mass social uprising that's actually against them and not kind of meant to favor them, like it's at some point they're going to have to try to kind of somewhat restore things economically, right? Especially considering basically the best way to keep an establishment in power is to kind of keep things going well economically. That's not the only way you do it. And I've been very adamant that that's not the only thing that matters, and you can definitely have a healthy economy and unhealthy society. But generally speaking, to avoid like mass social upheaval, mass social unrest, and by the way, again, this is not a threat for violence. It's just kind of an assessment of the way things go, right, in societies, in politics. That's kind of the one thing you want to avoid. You know what I mean? Biden going into 2022, 2024, all things considered, still is going to want to try to run on somewhat of a decent economy, kind of a decent show going on here, right? So I would say, again, and this is something that I think we do kind of have negotiating power on collectively. Even though we don't have the institutions, we don't have the government on our side, we don't have basically anything, but we do have like us, right? And it's like, you look at kind of the fact that we're basically a little bit less than basically half of society, I believe, right? I don't know the exact number, but in some places we're like a majority of societies, depending on the state, right? But we're basically collectively, give or take, somewhere around 50% of society. How are they realistically actually going to be able to function without 50%? I know it's all part of the plan. This is what they want, this and that. Realistically speaking, they do know they kind of need us. They do kind of need us. This corrupt, satanic system, frankly, does need kind of us as the 50% to basically operate functionally. And if push comes to shove, if it comes to the point where we need to not engage in the system, withdraw from the system, that's what we got to do. And that's that's what I think is going to happen, and that's where I commend the employees of Southwest Airlines. And that's basically, endorsement of it aside, that is just what you're going to see. That's what's going to happen. So, to the corporations, to the federal government, if you don't want this to be a problem, if you don't want this stuff to be happening, reconsider what you're instituting. Like, it's really not that difficult. So anyways, they are replacing America from the third world. No, that's true. Absolutely true. Something else to take into account. And it really, that's why I think, frankly, this is something you have to take a stand on now. That's something you have to take a stand on now, right? Because because I was talking about this with someone earlier today, and they're like, you're basically suggesting crashing the economy. I'm not suggesting crashing the economy. I'm suggesting letting the economy crash. Get it right. But that is the issue, right? That is sorry. Are there stream problems? I think it's fine. People are saying it's fine now. It's fine on my end. That is the issue, though. Like, really, time is running out. This has been going on. Stuff like this has been going on for over a year now. We've kind of said some bad things about it. We've gotten it to loosen up and get tighter again, this and that, right? But frankly, if this is not something that, we take a stand on now and really, make a big deal of now and kind of push back peacefully in civil ways now, in the grand scheme of things, right, this is not an issue that we can just sit on forever. Because come like even like a few years from now, they'll like you said, have it. Well, we don't need you. We have the Haitian migrants. They're just going to come in and fill your jobs, right? In the grand scheme of things, with the migration patterns, right, there's going to be enough of that where we're actually going to not have the power. We're not going to have the power. We're just going to be okay. Get out of society now, right? That's why this has to be the line. It has to happen now. It has to start now. And yeah, to be frank with you, we don't have much time left. We don't have time to keep saying, well, the line in the sand is going to be drawn pretty soon. No, like this it should have been drawn a long time ago. It has literally just has to start now. Okay, like that's it. That's it. I'll be right back. I gotta blow my nose. I always get a runny nose when I talk for a long time. I don't know why. It is a weird phenomenon of mine. Be right back. All right. Anyways, Ryan says just here, missed most of the live stream. Cool. Vince is gonna go tell the feds. So not true. So not true. Just for your information. I do not work for the federal government. I work for the Russian government. Get it right. That's a joke. Okay, Sam Matson says Nosegate too. Sam Matson is literally the CEO of making scandals out of my name. Okay, out of my name. Carter Shaw says, I threw up 5 times yesterday to own the feds. This is what the globalists fear. It's so true. Okay, it's so true. But anyways, Australia is 2 years ahead of us. Look, here's the reality of the situation. I know it's a cliche boomer talking point to say things will never end, but that actually is the truth. Like things will never end unless governments and the power institutions in place basically decide recognize that the social cost of continuing this stuff is just going to be too high, right? Because people did genuinely kind of think, right, when the CDC says, hey, if you're vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask anymore, and they lifted all the restrictions, this and that, right? Some people for a little bit thought, maybe it is over. Maybe it really is kind of the end of things. Obviously not the case. They had the whole Delta variant, all this stuff. Now, here's what you have to consider is the fact that, and this is actually, it is kind of scientific reality, that viruses mutate. They do. And so what they're saying and what they're warning us about, whatever, right, is actually the fact that what you're probably, right, going to have to deal with in the future is some type of vaccine resistant super variant, quote unquote. Right. And, this is what they're telling us going to happen, whether it happens or not, right? There's a pretty strong possibility. I mean, I'm just going to try to skip around YouTube stuff, but there's a pretty strong possibility that, they're going to have new variants, this and that, they're going to keep on using as justification to keep on doing more and more and basically extending everything, right? Australia is doing what they're doing now a year and a half into the pandemic, right? This is not March 2020 where they're doing this. This is October 2021. And that's what they're up to now, right? They're basically imposing more draconian lockdown measures than you saw in Wuhan, China, right? Even stronger than that. And so that's what you're going to... So again, keep in mind, this really is not going to be over. And before they were saying, well, it's over when we have a vaccine. Clearly, that is basically no longer the case to them. Like clearly it's not. First of all, and then second of all, like I said, you're probably going to have new variants and stuff, and many of them will probably be vaccine resistant. And so you're gonna basically keep dealing with this. And now you kind of listen to the narrative on this from the experts, quote unquote. They're not even really projecting an end in sight. Right? Before it was like, just wait till the vaccine, we got to get the population vaccinated. And then first of all, it was when they were available. And then it was like, we need this certain vaccination rate. Now at this point, it's just like, they don't even really have an answer. There basically is no answer to when the whole thing is going to end. They're not even really faking it anymore. And that's all to say, right? That there is no kind of point where it's like, okay, we're cool now. I mean, realistically speaking, I don't think there is. The restrictions, all of it, right? Everything that they've been doing, everything that's been going on, it's only going to basically end when they determine, like I said, that it's just socially impossible to keep it up, right? And that will only be the case. That will only be the case if the population kind of makes it clear, it's the cost of keeping these restrictions in place versus the upheaval of the population is just too great, right? So that's basically what it's going to have to take. Let me just say really quick for YouTube guidelines that, as you can see in this whole thing, we did not make any comments. We did not raise any questions. We did not say anything about the actual efficacy or the safety or, the anything of the vaccines themselves. Did we say that, folks? We did not say anything. Nope, we're specifically only talking about the policy of vaccine mandates. That's all we were talking about. Okay, and you can go through. We never brought up the efficacy or the effectiveness of the jab ones. We never did that. Did we ever do that, chat? No, we did not do that. Okay, we did not do that. We're only talking about the policy of it, whether or not it's a good or bad public political policy. By the way, when we say policy, we don't just mean political policy necessarily. We're also talking about corporate policy, right? If this is just a good thing, a good or bad thing that should be instituted. So let me just make that clear. Let me just make that clear, for the guidelines sake. But all right. Anyways, one last thing I wanted to talk about, and then we'll have a little bit of fun. We'll talk to the chat and whatnot, and we can expand on the new things we talked about tonight. So the one thing as I touched on earlier is the fact that Republican governors, and I've said this in past streams, Republican governors basically don't have your side on this. Like they just straight up don't. Like it's ridiculous, but it's definitely true. They just absolutely don't have your side. You have many Republican governors who refuse to do anything, like put in any legislation in place about stopping mandates of anything. Meanwhile, you see what the other side is doing. You see how kind of draconian and aggressive they are with it. But one thing I've been very critical of when it comes to Republican governors, because most of them have come out and said, "Oh yeah, no vaccine passports necessarily, and nothing to do with public mandates." Many of them have sort of taken some action against the mandates in the schools. It's like okay, like fine, I guess, right? But what you have seen them basically do nothing about is these corporate mandates, these private mandates, these basically companies and businesses telling their employers, you have to do this or you're going to get fired. You're not going to have your job. This is something that I've been very clear about. I don't want to hear any small government, whatever talking points. This is absolutely something that conservatives should oppose. If you want to live in a free society, you should be able to actually find a job and be employed and feed your family, without your medical status mattering in that aspect. We've talked about this before, and we've been very adamant. We've been very harsh and critical of Kristi Noem, for instance, for being someone who publicly came out and said, we're not going to do any, private bans on mandates because that's a free market and this and that, right? And functionally speaking, we have talked many times about the fact how it doesn't matter, functionally speaking, living in the real world, like how you actually have to deal with things and live in society, right? Because it is one thing to have abstract philosophy books about government versus private entities and NAP, this and stuff. In the real world, in the actual physical real world, you basically just have to live in that world. You have to live in that society. And in that society, you're going to have to interact, realistically speaking. Unless you're going to go totally live off the grid, you're going to become a member of the farm right, which is not something I'm against, but also is not something that you should be forced to do, right? You shouldn't be forced to live off the grid in order just to live in just to have some degree of freedom or whatever on this issue, right? So we've been very clear about the fact that this is absolutely every Republican governor needs to take, whether it's an executive order or legislation through the legislature. I don't really care. Supreme Court rule. I don't care what it is. Banning private mandates by businesses, not just public ones, not just the passports, basically all of the mandates in their states. Okay. This is something I've been calling for. This is something here in Florida we have not done. Right, we were one of the first states to ban the passports, but we still have basically nothing covering actually private mandates for the employer for the sake of employees, right? So we protect the consumers. So if you want to go into a business, whatever, don't worry about it. But if you want to work in that business, if you need to be an employee, you're actually not protected in Florida. Anthony Sabatini, we love Anthony Sabatini, folks, don't we? State representative, spoke at the APU summit. He's been calling for a emergency legislative session because the legislature is not in session right now. I believe they only meet 2 months out of the year. But Sabatini, great guy. We love Sabatini. Has been calling for an emergency session to ensure that private, ban all mandates. Right? Not just the public ones, all of them, all the private ones too in that state. Ethan Ellis, really quick, let me get to the super chat, says most based native tribe in your opinion. I think I got to go with the Seminoles. I got to be honest, all things considered. And I don't just say that because of the football team. I think the Seminoles actually do have a pretty cool history. They do. And they're one of the least coping tribes out there, right? They don't cope they generally speaking actually were a lot more westernized than a lot of the other tribes, and you got to respect that. You got to actually kind of respect the fighting spirit and I actually do have respect for them. Okay, hold on, I gotta blow my nose again. I don't know what's going on here, folks. I swear, every time we get an hour into the live stream, I just have the need to blow my nose. It's so odd. Well, okay, as I was saying, this is not even something in the free state of Florida. Ron DeSantis, this and that. This is not even something that Republicans in the state of Florida are even protecting you against. Okay? As great as DeSantis has been on some of the mandate stuff, frankly, he's totally dropped the ball on this. The Florida GOP has totally dropped the ball on this entire issue, right? They are basically allowing these private businesses and these private companies to tyrannize their employees, right? And a big reason big reason for this, by the way, is Disney. They're scared of Disney. Disney, obviously one of the biggest employers in the state of Florida, especially in the Central Florida area. They've implemented this I believe company-wide mandate when it comes to their employees. And quite frankly, like we talked about, it is politics. Money talks. Corporate power talks, right? This and that. So, with that being said, I do have to be admitting defeat. We are Florida nationalists. We are Florida nationalists, as you can tell by the flag, as you can tell by this is where we live. I have to admit defeat to the state of Texas, which I hate to say. I hate to have to do it because I do not like Greg Abbott. I don't care how much good legislation he gets done, and he has gotten a lot of it done between now and 2022. I literally don't trust the guy. The guy has been a rhino, neocon, hack, and shill for the whole time he's been governor. And it's only like when he's getting this primary challenge from Don Huffines and Alan West, and it's kind of this growing sentiment against him. Only now does he become like one of the better governors in the country. Oh, give me a break. So let me be clear. I don't trust the guy. I don't like the guy. I still support primarying him. Okay. With that being said, I have to admit defeat. I have to concede ground. Okay. I have to. This is the session to Texans in the state of Texas. Sam Madsen sent that. We're on YouTube. I'm not going to comment on that. But Nosegate 3. True. But it's like, so as I was saying, Greg Abbott actually today signed an executive order in his state banning all mandates, all of them, which was bold. Hopefully it holds up in court. Frankly, if it doesn't hold up in court, I don't care. Who's going to enforce it? Just pull an Andrew Jackson. Like, literally, who's going to enforce it? Oh, the Supreme Court of Texas wants to, well, by the way, I mean, it's a conservative court. I think they'll be fine, right? I would assume. But, they want to, if the court wants to enforce this, then let them come enforce it. Oh, wait, they don't have the power to. They don't have the power to because they don't control the law enforcement, right? They don't control the actual people who enforce the law. Too bad. That should be the answer. I mean, that should be the honest answer at this point. But assuming it holds up, this is exactly what I've been calling for. A ban on all mandates, not just the public ones. You got to cover those private ones too, because the issue of corporate power and the issue of millions getting just fired and unable to find work because of such mandates, that matters too. And that's very important. That's equally important. And, I got to give credit. Abbott did something, and Abbott did something that he actually took the lead on, right? It wasn't a matter of following the other governors or whatever, right? Because historically, throughout this whole thing, for the most part, it was mainly that Ron here in Florida would do something first, and then Abbott would follow him, right? He kind of just follow in his tracks. Not the case here. This is actually something that Abbott basically took initiative on. Ron, I don't know what he's doing, I don't know. Man's just been absent recently. But sadly, we do have to cede a little bit of ground to the state of Texas. But with that being said, hopefully it is kind of an Overton window shifting thing. Because we obviously know that these governors, there is kind of this competition. We all kind of implicitly know there's a kind of a competition among the governors between the base of like, who's the better governor, this and that. And they always try to outdo each other. Every state every red state wants to be kind of the leading pusher on an issue, especially between really Texas and Florida. Basically, kind of trade blows. Who's kind of like the leader nationally of statewide GOPs? And so, with that being said, hopefully this inspires a lot of other, Republican governors to do the same. So I will say, I wish it was our governor, but I will say it is obviously a good thing that it happens, because hopefully, I still don't know. I mean, to be honest, I really still don't know. I know for a fact Kristi Noem ain't gonna do it, because she's already been very adamant. Anything that touches private corporate power is big government. So this is why I'm not going to touch, men and women's sports or anything. I mean, we know the story with Kristi Noem. We know that Asa Hutchinson, as I call him, Ass Hutchinson, down in Arkansas, he's not going to do anything. But, you would expect Ron DeSantis probably should do something. A lot of sort of the Republican governors who are rhinos, but who are facing primary challenges potentially, like someone like Brian Kemp especially, you would at least expect maybe he would do something about it. I don't know. It's Brian Kemp. But I'm just being hypothetical here, because if you put enough kind of pressure and you put the precedent, hey, these other states have already done it. Where are you, buddy? Why aren't you doing this? Hopefully we see that happen. But it actually is a kind of white pill, even if it's Abbott, who, again, I don't like it. I don't trust, to see some Republican actually kind of doing this. So, anyways, Asa Hutchinson is a big rhino. It's so true. Hold on. I don't know why I'm getting so stuffy right now. It's literally Nosegate 3. What is going on here, folks? I'm just gonna literally grab Kleenex right here. Yo, based Kleenex box that I haven't even opened yet. It's true. Actually, you know what? I probably know what this is from. I know what this is from, because I have been kind of congested the past few days, because on Saturday, we were doing a little bit of tailgating, and for some reason, I didn't even notice it. I don't know how the heck it happened, but we all came back covered in dirt, because it wasn't like super grassy. It was kind of like dirt, and I came back, and you could see just the dirt stains over my arms, and literally I was blowing my my nose got really stuffy, and I was blowing up, I was blowing my nose. And what was coming out was literally black. It was like dirt. I was like, how did this happen? What the heck happened to us? But that did occur. So maybe that's what it's from. Maybe that's what it's from. It's the residues. Or I have the college cough. Just kidding. I don't have the college cough. That's just not true. Everyone knows the college cough is I mean, this is kind of a secretly known thing. The college cough comes from partying and premarital sex. That's what it comes from. I do not do such things. So that is not true. That is not true. But it is tailgate gate. That is the case. All right. Anyways, with that being said, guys, send in your chat, send in your super chats. We'll go for about another hour here, and it is time. It is time for Q&A. It is time to discuss with chat whatever you want to discuss. So here we go. I never heard of the college cough. It is. Well, I don't know if you're even in college. I don't know if you even would know, or maybe you're just at a college where such things are not that prominent. I don't know, but it is definitely a thing. School colds and sicknesses in general are a thing, but I have a theory. Okay, I have a theory, because I notice everyone always comes back with it on Mondays. So I'm like, oh, that's why. It's probably not even like a cold. It's probably some type of bacterial infection or something that you caught sexually. That's just my theory. I don't know. That's my theory on the college cough. Because I've never seen the college cough infect someone that was just someone who's totally clean and pure. I've never seen it happen. I've only seen it happen to, the partiers. Not even really just the partiers, because it's people go to parties. That's not a huge deal. It's the people who go to parties and then, they do, they do a little bit of hooking up. In those such cases, Those are the people very often you see come back with a college cough. Something to consider. Few will take this into account, but it is a thing. It is definitely a thing. Ryan said I was talking to a boomer and I said we should ban mandates public and private. And she said you cannot regulate private companies. Yeah, the utter state of the boomer. The utter state of the boomer. Now, I will say to be fair to some of the boomers in the audience, I have met some who do get it on this issue. Now, when it comes to a lot of other things, maybe like social conservatism, immigration, I have found generally sometimes with the boomers, it's very hard to kind of move them on it. I will say, I have genuinely seen a lot of boomers who actually get it on the issue of public versus private mandates, especially if you just bring up, well, what about big tech? And they're like, that actually sounds a bit correct to me. And so, it doesn't work out. But I will say, yeah, this is definitely something you run into very often. Many such cases, again, I don't think the argument around them has to be that complicated. I mean, you could really get like deeply philosophical with this and explain, well, here's the true meaning of conservatism. Here's why your sort of fusionist, NAP, libertarian ideology is not conservative. I don't really think you have to go there. I don't think you have to explain all that. Really, like I said, just ask them the practical question. Be like, you know what? Take your abstract ideologies out of the picture for a minute, right? Functionally speaking, practically speaking, are you free, quote unquote, which you care a lot about, right, boomer, because you're a boomer? Okay, are you free, quote unquote, in a society where technically the government is not mandating tyranny? Use the word tyranny because that's a word that resonates with them. Many such cases, okay? Are you free if, sure, the government's not imposing the tyranny, but every major company and corporation and business that you rely on in order to kind of live the American dream and an American life are all tyrannizing you? Are you really free in that society? Practically speaking. And ask them practically, I don't want to hear your small government right now. Practically speaking, and if the answer is yes, and if we understand, as many boomers do at least say out loud, hey, I'm so sick of conservatives, because they have been kind of screwed by the GOP most of their lives. So they will often say things like, I'm so sick of Republicans, never using power back. I mean, that's why I love Trump. He was a fighter, and it's like, we need to stop. We need to basically play dirty like the left does, which most boomers do say. I actually find a lot of times it's like the cringe, like soy ingested, kind of YAFCON types, right? That Zoomer types that tend to be like, center right. They're like, whoa, but I think we should win with civility. Your average kind of MAGA boomer actually does not have that stance. Your average MAGA boomer, even if they don't fully get it and they don't kind of understand the situation, they have this instinct to want to kind of like wield some degree of power, or at least some degree of kind of like playing dirty, quote unquote, the same way the left does. So basically bring it back to that and be like, well, if you care about this issue and you care about, functionally speaking, not having to deal with all the mandates all across the place, it's pretty clear. I find most of the time it works with boomers. Now, if it doesn't work, then you got to get a little deeper. You kind of got to explain why fundamentally this whole thing they believe isn't even conservative at all, the true meaning of conservatism, this and that, the true meaning of freedom, the true meaning of liberty, right? That not so much the contemporary postmodern understandings of what those words mean, but I find you don't normally have to do that. Normally, if you just kind of use the generic, well, practicality sort of line on them, I've generally found it works. Because I will post stuff on Instagram. Instagram is probably my most like boomer normie audience of any platform. I get a bunch of unfollows every time I say something like ban porn, or I take any remote stand against social immorality, anything like that. They will come after me. They will unfollow me. Praising of Vladimir Putin. Oh man, like the boomers don't like. But most of the time, when I've come out and said private mandates matter too, I've had a pretty good experience with the boomers. I found most of them to be in agreement there, because it is also something that affects them. Most of these people are the ones who are dealing with job losses, all that stuff. And so it is something that they look at and they're like, I don't want this. I hate this. This sucks. Use the power. They tend to get it. I don't know. But, if you're dealing with a really libertarian boomer and not like your generic MAGA boomer, then maybe it's a different story. But, Sorry. Oh, I'm so stuffy. This is not cool. It's literally hindering my ability to speak correctly. All boomers are coomers. kind of true to an extent. Kind of true to an extent. You know, of conserve, not in general, because obviously I think, yeah, I probably would say the boomers growing up, your average boomer probably better on that, better on, well, yeah, no, I would say so. Better on, sexual things when they were growing up compared to our general generation growing up. But when it comes to specifically conservative people, it is definitely the case, because your kind of boomer grew up in the 1960s. Many of them probably were engaging in it a little bit, or even if they weren't like the free speech Berkeley movement, many of them probably in college or at their college age, if they were in the draft, whatever, at that age probably had the luxury, quote unquote, in their eyes, of being with a woman who did, the whole sexual liberation movement. And so that's kind of what they've grown up in all their lives, And so I find it to be the case most of the time with boomers. It is the case that, they, on that issue, tend to not be really really that solid on. The Zoomers, I think because we specifically grew up in a place where, see, back then to them, the whole sexual revolution thing. Now they grew up originally in the 50s when they were kids in a society that was very kind of strict and very religious and very Christian, right? This and that. And come the 60s, you have kind of like this immediate freedom, right? This immediate kind of revolution. And then to them, it's like, oh, what the I can have sex with a bunch of women. This is so cool. Like, they're kind of in that perspective because it's fresh, it's brand new. We grew up in a period where that's always been around. And we've realized, because we've experienced the true extent of the sexual revolution, everything that's been pushed down us, how bad it is and how morally corrupt it is and how much we actually hate it. And so our natural reaction, our natural youthful reaction against power structures, kind of our youthful rebellion, is a rebellion in the opposite direction. It's a rebellion against the sexual revolution. It's a rebellion against porn. It's a rebellion against hookup culture, all these things. And so for us, as Zoomer conservatives, as young conservatives, I find, not always, because frat boy conservatism is a thing, barstool conservatism is a thing. I'm not denying that, because it is a real thing. It is a real thing. Conservatism, I should say like republicanism, but you know what I mean. But with that being said, those who are kind of dedicated to this movement genuinely seem to be actually kind of more socially conservative on that. I tried to red pill my parents on social issues, and it's like talking to a brick wall. Yeah. Boomers tend to be very guilty of operating in the sort of liberal social view, because this is what's been fed to them over the past few years so strongly, especially under the Trump years, which is very interesting because this wasn't really always around. You go look at even something like Fox News from 2014, they really weren't doing this. It really is kind of a new phenomenon, but unfortunately it is a phenomenon, especially under the Trump years, where you kind of have this narrative and kind of this agenda to basically prove that we as conservatives are the real liberals. We're the real tolerant ones. We're the real pro-gay ones. All this, this kind of story here, right? And so they will operate in a totally liberal worldview and basically just try to prove that they are the real liberals right there. That we're just the true liberals. We're the original liberals. No, you're not. No, you literally were not a liberal back then. But I think that's basically the issue, and that's basically why they will not cave to you. They will not get it on social issues. Hold on, I gotta change out my camera battery. Let me grab it real quick. But I think you have to break that first. You have to break that first. And it's hard. It's hard. I find that even something like gay marriage, which most of the movement opposed, like just 2014 or 2015 was it? So just like 6 or 7 years ago. This is not something that has been around for decades. That Supreme Court ruling is less than a decade old. And this is something, again, most conservatives, especially those who are like evangelical Christians, who is most of our base, right? Most of our base is evangelical Christians, has just totally flip-flopped on this issue in the span of a few years, So And now, especially on Instagram, again, it's at the point now where if I oppose gay marriage, again, which is something that was mainstream, especially in our movement, like only a few years ago, now, you'll get the you get this backlash. You'll get this very liberal, at least characteristically liberal backlash that you shouldn't be getting from conservatives because they are conservatives, right? But of course, they'll make the entire issue an issue of freedom and all this stuff. Listen, we feel bad for the boomers to an extent. They've been fed a lot of lies, but also, I think it is our job. It is our job, as people who get it, people who are based in epic and red pilled, so true, to spread truth. But it's not our job. Maybe I don't know if it's our job, but we just physically can't force them to accept truth. We can only encourage them to come to truth. So it's also going to take an epiphany for themselves, and an epiphany of what do I currently believe, right? Because obviously we know what they currently believe, but what do I ultimately want for my country, and what do I want my country to look like? Then realistically speaking, how am I going to get there? Because if you just ask these boomer these two questions, one, again, what do I want my country to look like? Well, I want my country to look like the country I grew up in. Fair enough point. Like I'm fine. Oop, I don't know what happened. Literally, like, yeah, that's, I mean, to an extent, maybe we want to even do a little bit further than that, but largely that's kind of what we want too, right? So they actually kind of have the right goal there. But how do we get there? And you'll find again that their kind of ideology, what they believe, their methods, their approach to politics, like it's very obvious that is not going to get us there. That's not going to work, right? Lowering the marginal tax rate by 2% is not going to restore the country that your parents grew up in. It's not. And if you, again, this is the problem, right? They start at these apps. They basically, and they're not even really thinking about this, but I think they're just taking what's kind of fed to them. But this is really, I think, the problem with conservative thinking. We start at abstract principles instead of just starting at basically, what do I want my country to look like? Because I think you need to start with your vision. You need to start. I don't know why this keeps doing this. I'm sorry. I don't know why it keeps doing that. You need to basically start at your vision, right? This is just what I want my country to look like. Not just in terms of the role of the government. This is what I want my society to look like. Now, everyone, whether they want to acknowledge it or not, has some type of vision of this. Like they have some type of idea what they want. Like everyone does, quite frankly. Even your most ardent libertarian who only believes in the NAP, still, even them to an extent, like they still have some belief in this. They just don't want to use it. But then I think you need to start there and then work backwards into how do I get there? Not start at nonsensical principles that don't even make any sense and don't really have any real world application and were written by a bunch of atheists, by the way. Okay. Or not even all atheists, but a bunch of atheists and pagans who were liberals, these worldviews and these abstract principles of small government and all this whatnot. It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. You need to be working the other way around. Again, start. Okay, hold on. It's just stupid. Wait. Hold on. I'm going to fix this. Because I don't know why it's doing that. Sam Matson says the problem is almost the opposite of what you're saying. They still think it's the country they grew up in. They still think everything is fine. Maybe to an extent. I don't know if I entirely agree with this because I definitely do. I think it is the characteristic of the boomer also to kind of go on about, back in my day, let me tell you how much things better were back when I grew up. Now, I'm going to be honest. I do not hate when old people tell me about that. I don't hate. I know a lot of young people roll their eyes and like, Grandpa, you didn't even have an iPhone. No, I actually kind of like revere and respect the way they grew up, and I actually kind of hear those stories, and I'm just like, I wish. They actually do kind of motivate me to an extent. They kind of motivate me because I'm like, I know you have no vision or really thought process of how to get back there. You just are nostalgic of it. But I do have a thought process of how to get back there, at least in theory. I mean, we have to kind of impose it and actually do it. But I have kind of thought out at least a way to kind of get back to the country you grew up in. But the country you grew up in actually sounds like a nice place. It actually sounds like a nice place. Sounds like a country that belongs to you, right? Now, I will say that I don't necessarily think they still think it's the country they grew up in. I think they acknowledge that the country's, what do they say all the time? This country's a socialist country now. It's a damn communist country, It's not so much that. It's that they're still, they still think that the same basically solutions that worked for Ronald Reagan and, the Reagan Revolution and were kind of the conservative, quote unquote, solutions. By the way, I would argue those solutions didn't even work back then because they enabled what we have now. But they're still thinking in that methodology, right? They think that basically we can get the country, but they don't think the country is the same. They think that we can get the country back to what it was with the same mythology that got conservatism here in the first place. And the reason that is because, when you're old and you're kind of just stuck in your ways, basically whatever worked for the way we thought of things in the 80s, same way now. You know what I mean? I think that's the way that's kind of the reason, the really kind of the real approach, right, that they're taking here. So, Easy Legendary says, I would do anything to be born from 1945 to 1960. You would want to be a boomer? You would want, I'm just kidding. We mess with the boomers. Unironically, the boomers had it good. Because the boomers really got to, well, actually, I'll counterpoint this. You know what? When I would want to be born, I would want to be born in like 1938, 1937, something like that. I think that's the ideal time to be born. Because that way, you're kind of old enough to experience the 50s. Like, not when you're a child, like when you're a young adult. Like, you could experience the 50s. You could experience Elvis as a young person, right? You could start the family in the 50s. You could buy your home. You could buy your suburban dream in the 50s. You can plant that in the 50s. But you're young enough where you didn't have to fight in World War II, right? So you kind of luck out in both ways. So I will say that is probably actually the ideal time to be born. Silent generation. The silent generation actually probably has it the best, right? So, being a millennial has been something. Oh, you're a millennial? You're a millennial? Cringe? Just kidding. We do a little bit of trolling. But the state of the millennials. Gen X, I don't have a particular problem with Gen X. They're just whatever. Boomers. I don't actually dislike the boomers. I just get fed up with them sometimes because I'm generalizing, by the way, okay? I know we have a lot of boomers who watch this channel and are fans of this channel. We're not talking about you. We love you, but in many cases, they tend to just kind of not get it on the political issues, right? And it's in many ways, like I said, it's not entirely their fault. When you've been fed Fox News, modern Fox News for as long as you have, I kind of get it, but it does get annoying. It does sometimes get annoying when, you do something like, well, I don't think there should be mandates in private companies either. They're like, but isn't that, the small government, big government? Like, that does get on our nerves sometimes. But the millennials, oh, I don't know what happened there. I don't know. I like to be a Zoomer nationalist, though, okay? I like to believe that we as Zoomers will do something. Because we really are the last chance of America. I mean, let's be honest. Is the generation after us going to have the time or the capacity or the willpower to really be able to do anything? No, I kind of think in many ways, these Zoomers were kind of born in the right time in history where either we're going to be the generation that starts the counter movement, kind of starts the clock to turn back in the other direction, or that's it. And I think really when you kind of break it down, we are the generation who is kind of, I think, the most equipped to do it because we watched our childhood, right? Because I think when we were kind of young, the early Zoomers, we were kind of the last kids to kind of have a somewhat normal time growing up. The kids who are growing up now, I don't know what's like. They do not live in a remotely normal world. We did not have it as good as our parents, sure. We did not have as much freedom as our parents, but we still had a good time. I mean, think back to our childhood. Did we not still have a good time? We had our Game Boys. We had the DSi. We had Party Rock Anthem. We had Dynamite. We had Gangnam Style. Okay, it was a decent time. growing up as a Zoomer was not terrible. It was actually all right. It was not terrible. But it was really when we started to get into like high school and college that we really started to watch things hit the fan. Okay. So in many ways, I think our generation kind of saw everything that was good while we were still young and while we still kind of had the energy and the capacity and the willingness to kind of like put up a peaceful pushback against these things. We were kind of a generation that watched our world basically collapse and get robbed from us. Again, while we were still young enough to be kind of an effective counteracting to the system, we watched that happen. And so, that's to say, I don't know. I think that for that reason alone, in many ways, it is actually the Zoomer who is basically most equipped to kind of take things back, right? That's why Zoomer conservatives tend to be the most kind of aggressive when it comes to the use of political power and kind of serious when it comes to just the sheer steps it's going to take to reclaim the country. And look, realize it or not, I know the kind of paleocon populist whatever base online tends to be characterized as being like the basement caucus. It is not the reality that we are. Okay, it is actually the reality that many of us at this stage in our lives who care about politics, care about the country, and have this kind of plan, this vision to actually seriously retake things and push things back, not necessarily just kind of performatively shill for the same things that have been going on for decades. We are taking power. We're working on campaigns. We are interning at places, right? So, obviously now, like we're still young, but 10 years from now, 20 years from now, as is the natural progression of things, it is this generation of conservatives that is going to have the institutional power. And I don't even care if it's just 2% of us. That's definitely more than the past generations had, right? We have this very small, because I'm not even talking about all Zoomers, because I understand most Zoomers are a lost cause and they're just like the millennials. But again, understand democracy is a lie. Democracy is a bunch of nonsense. The reality is political movements and political, transformations, whatever, political reclaimings, political reconquistas, if that's what you want to call basically what this is, figuratively speaking, are really in reality not led by the masses. The masses have never led any serious public political movement ever in history. Political movements, especially ones who are significant, are simply led by small groups of people who are very devoted, who really are really dedicated, are very talented, are very wise, right? Are very tactful. It is these small groups of people who really pull the strings and ultimately run things. The left-wing cultural push, the long march through our institutions, right, that has been going on basically for a century now, that was not coordinated by some huge group of people. It's not coordinated by a democratic coalition of people. It was coordinated simply by a small group of scholars, academics, Communist Party members, like just a very small group of people who were effective, who understood it, who marched through everything. Well, understand, our generation of Zoomer conservatives, of young conservatives, basically has that small but vocal and willing and aggressive and caring group of, specifically, I would say, young men, specifically the young male Zoomers, who are really serious about it, who understand it, who all kind of have the same collective vision of the march through our institutions that it's going to take. And so we, I think, have that group in our generation. It has the capacity to be the right-wing equivalent of the original cultural Marxists, of the original neoconservatives, of the right wing, the actual right wing version of that, right? In the sense that we have the power to be that small group of people who, again, marches through the institutions, understands the need for marching through the institutions, understands the way to approach it. Because I think that's the issue. A lot of the older people, by the way, are too old to even get started on that because they already have their careers. They've already planted their seeds in certain places, this and that, right? But we kind of, as the young generation who gets it, also, I think we get it. I think we understand kind of what needs to be done to a greater extent. This small handful of young conservatives, if it's going to be anyone, it's going to basically be us, that over the next few decades we're going to basically start to take power for ourselves. And like I said, many of these people, many of the people I know, this and that, are at a young age getting into positions of power, getting into positions of influence, but also understand what needs to be done with that power. Understand what needs to be done. We all kind of have this, even we don't even like necessarily get together and talk about it, but we kind of have this collective idea of what needs to be done to the country and kind of what needs to be fulfilled. And so, expect it. They fear the Zoomers. They fear the Zoomer generation. It's true. The small handful, like I said, of Zoomer conservatives specifically. So, So, anyways, as I was saying, GB says, literally all I want is traditional values, a good job, a pretty wife, a nice home, land, community, and lots of kids. Same, King. Literally same. I think that's what we all want. I think that's what we all want. But, and not to say that it's literally impossible, because it's obviously not. I think there are still ways to achieve that life. But in many ways, that life has been robbed from us. It's been robbed from us. And that anger alone should be what fuels you. Should be what fuels you in this sense. But it is. It's so true. It's so true. It's so true. Is that not what we all want? If you're a young male and that's not ultimately what you want from life, then you've been poisoned. And I would argue in many ways, you've been poisoned by what I would say is Western feminism. Like, you've actually been poisoned by feminism as a man. Okay. That is really specifically these particular social movement that has basically grown you and turned you against that lifestyle is feminism. And if you don't want to be a feminist, if you don't want to be a male feminist, consider it. But it's so true. So true, kid. So true. And it's very sad, the utter state of how exactly you're going to achieve this, right? Because you want traditional values. Most of society doesn't. You want a good job. That job will probably be taken at a far lower wage because of immigration or globalization or outsourcing or whatever it is. And maybe the fact that you're just blacklisted because you're not a shill for the globalist order, so you won't even get hired. A pretty wife. Very hard to find women who are even like remotely in touch with their femininity. You definitely don't. I know a lot of people who are perpetually online like to think some like magical Christian Tradwife is going to fall into their arms, but that's not the reality of women today. Not to say they don't exist out there, but they're not really accessible. They're not really just running about where you can just kind of pick your choice of them. It's not really the situation you have now. A nice home. Where? You look at the future, they have the zone. Nice homes are going to be zoned out of existence. It's already happening in California. You probably won't even be able to own the home. You probably have to rent the home. But at this point, it might be some type of like postmodern pod style living, whatever it is, or a multi-generational, residential housing complex. That's what they're doing now. They're kind of getting rid of this is the kind of the plan, to get rid of the suburbs and put, these mass living complexes on what should be suburban plots of land. I mean, you can still go to Montana or something, but even there, land is incredibly expensive now because of the fact that many billionaires, i.e. Bill Gates, i.e. a lot of rich people, have been buying up kind of the empty land and community. Where are you going to find that? And lots of kids, still possible. Where are you going to find the woman to have the kids with? I don't mean to blackpill you. I'm not trying to get you demoralized. I'm trying to make you angry. I'm trying to make you angry against the system who is systematically robbing you of every single thing that you just said you want. Okay, it is true. It is true. We will remember what they took from us. We will remember. We will not forget. And we will not forget until we have power. After we have power, we will not forget either. Let me just say that we just simply will not forget. Feminism was one of the worst things to ever happen to America. True, I would argue perhaps it's even the single worst thing, but we could kind of weigh those on a scale sometime. Vince, this is depressing. I know it's depressing, but again, like I said, I don't mean to make you depressed. I mean to make you angry. Keep in mind, it is one thing if you're like 60 years old and I'm telling you this and I'm telling you about how the country maybe you grew up in is being robbed from you. You are young, buddy. On your feet, soldier, peacefully speaking. I'm not saying to actually, but like figure you are a young male, okay? You are a young male, technically in like the prime quote unquote of your life. Now's not the time to get demoralized. Now's the time to basically be extremely angry about that and use that anger effectively for us collectively as this small but vocal but tactful generation of young conservatives. Use that to your advantage. Anger, unironically, is a pretty strong political force. So. Conservatarian 17 says, Vince, what do you think about a limit on the maximum amount of land people can buy to prevent things like Bill Gates and Soros and BlackRock from buying it and creating buying it all and creating a feudal society? Maybe a hot take. I don't know, but I support that. I literally agree with that. I agree. You do need a limit on the maximum amount of land because land and homes and all that stuff, it is not to be rented. It is not simply to be like, and I understand market principles. I'm not saying to totally throw those out, but fundamentally speaking, these are things that are not meant to be rented for profit or just bought up to hoard. Land exists for Americans to live on and for Americans to enjoy. And that's not me going full socialist mode. I'm not trying to like say that there's no supply and demand for land. Obviously, it has to be still treated as a commodity in order for it to be allocated effectively, this and that, allocated fairly. But it is to say that yes, something does need to be done about Bill Gates buying up all the land in Montana and driving up massively the price of land for ordinary people who want to just simply live kind of a little bit off the grid in a way, right? And I think there's a reason why he's doing it. And I absolutely think we need to just stop it and say, no, we're not going to let you do this. I don't think it's very complicated. To me, it's not even a complicated moral question. The answer is yes. Soros, same thing. BlackRock, evil, same thing, Homes are meant to be owned. Homes are meant to be lived in, not rented. A country of renters. When people own homes, right, there's something kind of inherently paternalistic and inherently kind of nationalistic in the sense that I think when you own something, when you're not renting, but you're owning it, this is my home, this is my neighborhood. I'm not just living here on a 2-year lease. This is where I live. This is my home, right? When people own homes, I think naturally there's kind of a sense that you actually sort of buy in more. You buy into your community. And when I say buy in, I mean you take it seriously. You buy into it in the sense that you begin to treat it as yours, own it as yours, and become civically responsible. Right? You're civically responsible because you treat it like it's yours, not like it's someone else's, not like it's a hotel room. Because what do we all do with hotel rooms? Let's be honest. Do we clean up after ourselves in hotels? No, we're renting this place, right? We're just temporarily staying out in this place. In the same sense, when you're a country of renters, when you're a country of leasers, that is exactly what you have. There's no long-term sense of paternalism whatsoever. On the other hand, in a country where people they own homes and they own things, naturally, you're going to have, like the famous quote says, you're going to have a society where old men are planting trees of the shade of which they know they will not sit in. Because they're buying into the sense, and people will naturally buy into the sense, that this not just their home, but also what their home represents, this country, this system, this United States actually belongs to them, right? Like this is your country. I think naturally, when you begin to own things for yourself, if you own land, you own home, people tend to more buy into that kind of nationalistic, paternalistic sense that this is my country. This is my country. And that was something that was central to the American dream for a very long time. And why has it been robbed from you? Why are we now being pushed to be a country of renters, to be a country of leasers? Simultaneously, why we have an immigration policy that is ensuring that our country has as little in common as possible with itself as like humanly possible. Like, we're just totally divided against ourselves. Why do you think that is? I don't think it's much of a mystery. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, actually, So A bought home is an anchor, a rented home is a cable. So true. And, I think when you own a home, naturally, you're not just renting it. There is something to be said that a lot of people like to settle down. Okay, I have a home now. I'm not renting, I have a home. So I can't just sell this home. I mean, people do sell their homes, but it's like, I'm not going to just sell this home off the dime. This seems like now is the time to put down roots, start a family, have children, right? Buy into society. Whereas if you're kind of just a renter, you're really not going to put down the roots that are going to make you grow permanent loyalties to family, children, community, whatever it is. You're literally just a wage slave essentially for the system. And because you're on a lease, you're just willing to basically literally just move around to wherever is needed to be done to profit the transnational corporations, and you have no loyalties to not the system, I should say. You're probably more loyal to the system. No loyalties to the country, I was going to say. But you're actually that's the other thing. Your only loyalty essentially is to the system and the system you serve, and the preventing of people from planting down roots. Exactly the same thing. Noah Boyd says, haven't done a super chat in a while. I appreciate it, Noah Boyd. I appreciate it. We love to see it. So true. Thank you, Noah. And I think that's part of what is missed in the whole America should become a nation of renters thing. And I believe in that article. They also tried to say it was uniquely American. It's actually an American thing. The Americans are pioneers. Americans like to move. Yeah, but Americans also moved around with an end goal of where they were going to settle. Okay. Yes, people went west on the Oregon Trail. You know what they also did? Once they got there, they settled down. Like, that was actually the whole point of it. Actually, as a matter of fact, the whole point basically of westward expansion was basically, all these eastern cities are overcrowded, this and that. It's hard to, find land. That was actually kind of the point. We're going to move west so that we can actually own land. You know what I mean? And not just be leasers, or we actually move west to have something for ourselves. It's kind of the polarly opposite concept, actually, of becoming a nation of renters where nobody owns anything. So, all right, let's see. There's no sentimental value in a rented home. So true. So true, King. There isn't a line of trad families just waiting for houses. It's just that there aren't families willing to spend money in the numbers needed. Largely true to an extent. Largely true. That's part of the problem. TVN64 says AR-15 versus AK-47. We actually talked about this. I was actually comparing the M16, which they're the kind of original base model. They are the same gun. Basically, is similar, right? I think this is a really easy debate for me. I would say AR-15 all the way. Now, I will say I don't just say that for Fox American patriotism version. Okay, by the way, it is definitely true. The AK-47 was invented by the Soviets, which is cringe, right? True, but at the same time, I'm being totally honest because I've dealt with both and I experienced both. When I say, no, it's not really about that. The AR and the M16, and even if you want to compare the M4 to the AK-74, the American rifles are just literally just better. I mean, they're just better. They're more accurate. This is what I found. They're more, it is. Now, let me just say, there's a reason why they generally tend to give AKs to terrorists, right? And you look at in Africa, the insurgents, the Taliban, ISIS, Al Qaeda, all those kind of rebel groups that have no formal military training and they don't even know how to clean guns, right? They all use AKs. You'll rarely see them actually using an M16. The reason for that is not just geopolitics. It's also because M16, AR-15, the American kind of style of rifle, those require cleaning. They require maintenance, right? They're not, but the AK on the other hand is like a rugged Russian gun. It's true. You can, for the most part, right? You can drop that thing in mud. You get it dirty. You can like basically clean it never, and that thing will still shoot. That thing will still fire. It is a rugged gun. True. Now, again, if you're gonna go in the mountains, and that's what you have to use it for, then sure, the AK is definitely the way to go. But if you're someone who's actually trying to like shoot for accuracy and actually has the capacity and actually has the willingness to maintain and take care of your gun, then I think it's really a no contest. The AR is overall better quality. It's more accurate, right? I found it to be more accurate. I found it to I like the reloading mechanism more. I like the feel of it more. You know, it also takes 5.56, so the bullets are lighter, which from a pragmatic standpoint is just obviously better. Now the AK-74, which came after the AK-47, they actually copied the NATO thing, right? They actually moved to, I believe it was a 5.45 round, 5.5 round, one of those, something around that caliber. So they actually also downscaled the size of their bullet because they realized it was more practical, right? You could carry more. It's lighter. You don't really need that big of a round necessarily for the type of gun. The 5.56 kind of range size works just fine. So, I mean, honestly, I think that should settle the debate for you. If you really want it to be the debate between the AR and the AK to be settled, or the M16, the AK, whatever, you know, just look at the fact that when the Soviets transitioned from the AK-47 to the AK-74, which actually happened in about like the 70s, they changed their round from the 7.62, which is bigger, to around like I think it's like a 5.45, something. It's somewhere around there. Basically around the same size as the NATO round, right? So it's basically around the same size as the 5.56. So for all the people who LARP about the AK-47 and try to say the AK is so cool, we love the AK. Don't get me wrong, it feels cool. Like it's you know, oh, look at me, I'm a Russian, right? Like I understand the LARPing aspect of it, but from a practical standpoint, if you ever want to determine which one is superior, as someone who has shot both in semi-auto mode, right, as like normal civilian guns, have also, I should point out, I've done an M16 and AK-47 full auto, you know, military, what do they always say? Military grade, like the actual military grade. Like I've done that. Okay, so I've done that too. And so I think that really should be the question is M16, AK-47 in their purest forms, right? Because the AR and like the civilian AK, those are basically just civilian versions of like the real thing. I've done those, and I can say side by side, the M16 was night and day. The difference was night and day. The AK, it was very hard to control, right? And this wasn't even like, oh, I just can't control. No, it's just, you know, you're shooting it. The recoil is very strong. You can only and I can also see how it's great for like, you know, a Taliban fighter who's just like blindly spraying, because it kind of works for that. But when you're actually trying to be accurate with it, you can kind of keep on target with an M16. AK, it'll just spray all over the place. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of the issue here. And like I said, again, if you ever want to kind of determine the which is better, well, why is it that the Russians copied us? They copied sort of the NATO round when they moved away from the AK-47 to the AK-74. They kind of copied our NATO round. They copied kind of our model of, you know, the way kind of to build an assault rifle, right? I think it's pretty obvious. I think the debate should be settled. Actually, the American style of riflery when it comes to that stuff is better. It is better. It is better. And I'm not going to pretend like it's not. You know, it is definitely. You definitely have to clean it more. I don't know the process of cleaning an AK, but I'm pretty sure it has less parts. It's probably a more simple cleaning process. But still, with that being said, I think it's objectively the AR. And I don't say that's a shill for America or anything. I just say that as someone who has tried both. Okay. I'm back still on the AR question. I know. I went on for a long way about that. Lalo says, full auto is useless, way too much recoil. I agree with that. Drain ammo, too much recoil, very inefficient. That's why most soldiers tend to use 3-round bursts today. For a combat situation, really, you don't need more than semi-auto, 3-round burst at the most. Full auto is extremely overrated in my opinion. Like, the only kind of, I guess, functional capacity is in a combat situation. If you really need to spray fire, you know what I mean? Covering fire. And I guess that's what in most of the time the military would use full auto for. I get that. Obviously you do need that. But for actual accuracy, actually trying to hit a target, full auto is just not the move. Just not the move. American rifles show more of a sense of style, of professionalism, and quality. Made in America. True, true. Look, we don't make many things in America anymore. But the thing is, the thing that one thing to kind of somewhat be proud of, the things we still do make in America, or at least still design in America, they tend to still work pretty well. Okay, rare point of American patriotism, American exceptionalism that's still applicable. We tend to make things that are better and work better. So, GB says Russian weapons are mass produced, a holdover from Soviet days. Other European weapons are overly complicated. American guns are a perfect middle ground. So true. So true. These freaking Germans and their fine German machinery that's like handcrafted and doesn't have interchangeable parts. Dumb. Thoughts on bump stocks should not have been banned. Obviously, Second Amendment. We're in support. With that being said, I don't really see the point. I don't think they're practical. I could see how they would be fun range toy. Probably not the move though from a practical standpoint. So Jim Eagle says, "What's the best pistol?" I don't know. I'm not an expert on pistols. I mean, I grew up. My dad had an XD growing up. He has an XD, I should say. XD9. That's kind of the pistol I grew up. It's funny I say grew up like we were gun fans for all of our lives and not like it was something we kind of picked up when I was like 15 or 16. But in high school, that's kind of the pistol I learned to shoot on. So I mean that's kind of what I'm used to. I don't know. I don't know if I'm the biggest fan of it. My dad is. I honestly might even like his Glock a little bit better. He likes kind of the smooth trigger pull of the XD. I don't know. I'm not the biggest fan of it. I'm not the best of it. I generally found I was actually more accurate with his Glock growing up than I was with the XD. But I don't know. I'm not really a pistol expert on this, to be honest. Best Eminem album, asking for a friend. Eminem show, I guess. I mean, what other prominent Eminem album is there that really compares to Eminem show? I really can't think of them. The 8 Mile soundtrack, like I mean, you know what I mean? I think it's pretty clear. Isn't Eminem show basically like the best thing he has? TVN64 says revolvers are best. That's a base take. I like revolvers. I like revolvers a lot. My dad doesn't. My grandpa does. But my dad doesn't. So growing up, I never really had a lot of experience with the revolvers. I only shot them like twice. I did like them the times I shot them. I was more accurate the times I shot them, much more accurate than I ever was with a pistol, which was interesting. With that being said, the only issue is the reloading. The reloading is just like if you're in especially if you're in like a defense situation, you want a rapid reload and revolver. I don't know. I mean, I guess if you have one of those like I don't even know what they're called, but one of those things where it's kind of like a clip, sort of like you can put 6 bullets in at once. I guess if you have one of those, you could do it a little faster, but still it's probably less efficient than a magazine. So, epic news. My dad is now aware of my YouTube channel. Well, if you're saying that's epic, then hopefully that's epic for you. So Lalo says thoughts on Alex, the math software. I hate it. So true. So true. Alex is cringe. Although I will say, there are things worse than Alex. 10 marks, I would say, is worse. I don't know if you guys ever used 10 marks. I don't even know if 10 marks is still around. I haven't heard of it for a while. But that was the Amazon-based math software, which should tell you all you need to know. But it was really bad. All right, it's really bad. So, speed loaders. Yeah, is that what they're called? When my grandpa died, the nurse found a .38 revolver under his pillow. What exactly is Alex? Alex is a online math thing that you probably use for class. Heavier guns mitigate recoil. Typically, yeah. But also, well, it sometimes depends with that. But the other issue is they're heavier, so it's like, and part of the thing about recoil is it takes you kind of time to like, move back and readjust. You know what I mean? But if it's a heavier gun, it's also going to take more time to readjust. So it honestly just depends. Jennifer says, yeah, we all know it's not because of weather or traffic control, because every other airline didn't have problems. You can look at the weather for the country. It wasn't like there were a bunch of storms this weekend. The weather was fine. It was literally because of an employee shortage. Like, everyone kind of knows that. Because if it's traffic control and if it was weather, all the other airlines would be having the same problems. It wasn't the case. It's only Southwest. Did I see Trump at the Iowa rally? I actually did not. I I was away when that was happening. I was not home when that was happening. But I heard it was pretty good. So would Obama theoretically beat Trump in 2020? Well, I don't know if my answer to that is YouTube friendly, so I'm not going to say it. To any feds watching the stream, being into guns means I like them as a hobby. So true. We're all just talking about hobbies here, okay? We're not calling for revolution. We're not calling for violence. We're not questioning the vaccine. We're certainly not questioning the election. None of those things. No such cases. When have I ever done that? When have I ever done? Never done that. I would never do such a thing. And it's true. You can go back in the stream. We never did that. We never did. True. So, all right, we'll take like 2 more chats here, and then I'm going to call it a night because I have something to finish. My chats are getting read a lot tonight. So true, because you're sending good chats. You're sending solid chats. What do you expect? If I had to choose one pistol, I'd do Beretta 92 FS. Used to be carried by police across the country. It's the most reliable pistol ever made. I'd either go for that or a Colt or S&W revolver. I've never tried them for myself, so I can't really comment on that. But I will take this into account. I will take this into account. Okay, base 3 a.m. stream. It's not 3 a.m. What? Wait, where are you? That it's 3 a.m. I'm on the east. What are you in England? England might be a little bit ahead of that though. Where are you that at 3 a.m.? Are you in like the Atlantic Ocean? Man, just chilling out here in the Atlantic Ocean. All this gun talk makes you want to own one. Okay, well, gun talk shouldn't make you want to own one. You should just want to do it anyway. But good night, King. Good night, guy. Yeah, good night, Noah. The Euros are watching. Abandon the stream. You know what? European conservatives, outside of British conservatives, because like Boris Johnson, okay. The European right has grown on me. Okay, it has grown on me. They don't tend to hold a lot of power in a lot of these countries. France is run by a liberal. Germany, I believe, is run by a liberal. Post Merkel as well. But the European right in a lot of these countries actually tends to be pretty solid. Like, they're not big on guns like us, unlike us, But on a lot of the other issues, I think they're actually better than the right in our country. And the Eastern European right, don't even get me started on the Eastern Europe. We love Eastern Europe, don't we, folks? Hungary, Poland, Russia. So true. So true. Great models for us, unironically. Vince, I meant have a long stream until 3 a.m. I don't know if we went to 3 a.m., but we did do a 4-hour stream that one Friday night. Remember the 4-hour stream? Do we remember the 4-hour stream? Do we love the 4-hour stream, don't we, folks? Jair Bolsonaro will be removed in 2022, unfortunately. Globalist one, I'm gone. I would not be surprised. I would not be surprised. No, you can't let it happen. Can't let it happen. Okay. Carter Shaw says, "Give us a white pill." White pill do I even have to give you? Okay, here's one. You know what? You know what? John 3:16. There's my white pill. There's my white pill to you. John 3:16. Look it up. Go. I know you probably know what it says. Okay, you probably know what it says. Like probably like the most famous Bible verse there is. Like, you know what I mean? But there's your white pill. Okay, if you want a white pill tonight, you know what? We'll show it on the screen. We'll show it on the screen. And if you're not Christian, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. And then the white pill, you won't be white pilled by it, and that's unfortunate. But yeah, it's like that's like the white pill I have to give you off the top of my mind right now. Okay. John 3:16 is unironically the best white pill in world history. In the history of the universe, probably, to be honest. There you go. There you go. There's your white pill king. There's your white pill king. Okay. Josh, dude, guy the Blake. I don't I don't know if what you're doing constitutes blasphemy, but I will excuse it because it is kind of funny. John 3:16, like, referring to John Doyle 3:16, says democracy is cringe to read Aristotle. Okay, I'm not gonna. Okay, that's kind of funny. Okay, that is funny. I won't deny that. But yeah, there you go. You want your white pill? You want your white pill? There you go. Were you expecting that white pill? No, you were not. No, you were not. No, you were not. Christian Vince arc, based. It's true. All right. With that being said, guys, I'm gonna wrap up the stream tonight. Have a good night. I hope you enjoyed the white pill. Hope you enjoyed the white pill. I thought that was, that was creative. Were you expecting me to do that? No, you were not. You were not. Okay. But that really is, I think, the real white pill. We have final victory in the end. We are all condemned by our wickedness, but through Christ, we can find salvation and we can find the final victory in the end. Like, so, all right, guys. With that being said, see you guys later. Have a good night. God bless. And peace. So true. So true.